That's great if you want to talk to each other. If you're having any technical difficulties, please use the chat. If you have specific questions about the topic, about industry recognized apprenticeship or anything that I discuss, please put those in the Q&A. And then at the end, we'll answer some of those throughout the webinar, but at the end, we'll go through and answer any that we have not touched on. So again, thank you for joining, everyone. My name's Rebecca Hutton, Deputy Executive Director at NIMS. I'm joined by our team here on the line, and we are going to talk at a pretty high level about industry recognized apprenticeship programs. I think everyone who's signed up to attend today's webinar probably saw that NIMS was named one of the standards recognition entities by DOL last month, and we were able to announce our the very first ever industry recognized apprenticeship program with Raytheon Technologies also last month. So we are moving full steam ahead. We are very excited to be participating in this kind of new modernized version of apprenticeship. We think there's a lot of potential, especially in our industry, but also in other industries. Even manufacturing companies that we've worked with have talked about using kind of this IRAP approach in completely other departments, HR departments, accounting, engineering. So we think there's a lot of application for this more flexible style of apprenticeship. So I just want to talk to you a little bit today about our approach to it, how we look at it, what we've put together as a program, the resources that we have available to anyone who might be interested in working with NIMS to set up an IRAP, and just sort of what that looks like, what's involved, what is an IRAP, how is it different from a registered apprenticeship program, what's the value in taking the time to register your program with NIMS and have it recognized. So that's kind of a high level approach to what we're going to talk about. So we can go ahead and get started with the next slide. First, just what is IRAP? I think everyone here probably has heard about it, at least somewhat, but you can see the definition here by the Department of Labor. Their emphasis was on making sure it's a high quality program, and it's similar to a registered program. It has to include a paid work component, an on-the-job training component, and an educational component. And to be industry recognized, it also must include an industry recognized credential. So the emphasis here is allowing someone to gain additional skills while they're working and earning an income, but also they're getting, kind of an educational component as well. So very similar to most apprenticeships that you've looked at or heard of in the past, just a slightly different approach. So we can go on to the next slide. So our approach to IRAP is, we believe, as I've said, that basically all apprenticeships are work and learn models. That's what an apprenticeship is. It could be in multiple forms. Right now in the United States, only about 0.3% of our workforce are engaged in an official registered apprenticeship program. That's one goal of DOL with this IRAP approach, is to make it more accessible to more people. We feel that there's probably a lot of work and learn models out there that just aren't registered with the government. So they're not being recognized as apprentices, but that's essentially what they are. So hopefully through IRAP, we can get more recognition for more of those types of training models. So what IRAP does, the main difference is it moves the responsibility of quality assurance and monitoring to a non-government SRE, or standards recognition entity. So, if you're familiar with the registered program, you had to register with the Department of Labor, either through a state entity or the federal DOL. All this does is it's saying, instead of doing that, you're going to register with this third-party organization such as NIMS or one of the other 17 SREs, depending on where you're located and what industry you're in. So our approach NIMS is, as an SRE, we have to ensure that the programs meet the government's requirements. That's just part of the deal. But we also want to provide this more structured framework and ensure a true high quality results driven training program. You can go on to the next slide. So how do we do that? So this is kind of can you go back a slide, please? This is just sort of the overview of what our responsibility is as an SRE. So we recognize IRAPs. There is a big emphasis on fairness and impartiality, both on our part and on the part of the program itself. We report to DOL the status of IRAPs. This is aggregated data. We're not reporting individual names or things like that. They get the name of the program, the organization, obviously, but then we just report to them on a periodic basis. The numbers of IRAPs that we have recognized, the number of apprentices that are currently active, the ones that have completed, et cetera, et cetera. We are responsible for maintaining ongoing quality control for IRAPs, ensuring they meet the applicable federal, state, and local laws. You can see the examples here. And then we would obviously suspend IRAPs that fail to meet those standards. That's not our intent. Hopefully we would be able to work with programs to make sure that they're able to meet the standards on an ongoing basis and have a good high quality program. So next slide, please. Some other key roles. Again, a lot of this is going to sound familiar if you've worked at all with registered programs. But basically, in addition to the SRE, which is NIMS, there's the entity that is trying to register their program or have their program recognized. And that can be one of two entities. It can be an employer, so any business that is employing an apprentice under an IRAP program can register that program with NIMS. They can register multiple job roles or occupations all in one IRAP. They may also be a sponsor. So just like with, if you're familiar with the, I think 2016 DOL grant programs to set up these intermediaries to help companies with registered apprenticeship, we can do the same with IRAP. So a third party that maybe is representing one or more employers can register an IRAP, and they take the responsibility of reporting, of interacting with NIMS, and handling all of that, and the employer is just running their individual program. So if you want to go on to the next slide, I have a kind of a visual of this that might make it a little easier to understand. So this just kind of is showing the relationship of the organizations. So you can see that NIMS is sort of the conduit between the IRAP programs and DOL. So we're collecting information, we're ensuring that the programs meet the standard, and then we're reporting that information in aggregate to DOL. And then on the employer side, as I mentioned, you can be an employer as the sponsor, register your own IRAP, or if you have a small employer, or if you're working within a federal grant or anything like that, then you could combine several employers together, or you could just have a third party that registers an IRAP for you. And they would become then the sponsor, and then the sponsor and the employer would be two different entities. So we can go on to the next slide. So this is, again, NIMS' role as an SRE, how we're approaching this. So essentially, we'll recognize apprenticeships for any industry for which we offer standards and credentials. So that's what we've currently registered. In a future slide, you'll see a list of those industries. As we add additional standards, or if other industries within our area of expertise want us to add sub-industries, we can always do that. But right now we're starting out with the ones where we offer standards. One IRAP can include, it could be for just one job role or occupation, or it could be for multiple. So if you have a machine shop and you want to set up an IRAP program, you could have one IRAP registered with NIMS, but it could be for multiple occupations. So the overarching program and how it's set up would be one IRAP, and then each job role or occupation would have its own, OJT piece and instructional piece and credentials possibly. And there could be overlap between those, but you wouldn't have to, register multiple times for multiple occupations. You would just submit the pieces that are different, if that makes sense. And again, sponsors could be the employer or it could be a third party. IRAPs can apply to more than one employer if you have this third party sponsor. Again, that could be in a situation where if you're in one of the current scaling apprenticeship grants that's out with DOL, technically a community college or even a state manufacturing association or workforce investment board, any of those types of entities could be a third party sponsor. And if you had, 5 or 6 small employers in the area that all need CNC operators, you could register one IRAP through that third party sponsor, and then each employer, would have their own kind of sub program underneath that. And then finally, the recognition will be valid for up to 5 years. That just depends on the program. NIMS does not have a time requirement. That is one of the biggest differences between IRAPs and registered apprenticeships, is there is no minimum time. So there's no 2,000 hours or X number of hours of related instruction. It has to include those components, both OJT and related instruction, but we don't set a minimum time requirement. We recommend that you set a maximum time requirement. So, if one program we've worked with, they have a CNC operator apprenticeship and they give their apprentices up to 1 year to complete it. If they can complete it sooner, which they've had several who did, some I think completed within 10 months, then they can move at their own pace and complete in 10 months. So it's all competency based. Training is set up to allow people to progress at their own pace. And so when we say that it's valid for up to 5 years, what we mean is that, IRAPs have to report to NIMS their data on an ongoing basis, at least annually. So they would do that for up to 5 years. And then after that 5-year period, we would just reevaluate, because, technology changes, make sure that throughout that time period, the OJT and related instruction are staying current with what's going on in industry, those kinds of things. So that's what we mean by valid up to 5 years. That is the choice of the employer to determine how long they want the program to run. So we can go on to the next slide. Yes, so these are the industries I mentioned. So the ones in red are the ones that we are currently offering recognition for. We will be adding additive manufacturing probably early next year. And then you can see in the classic offerings box, those are other industries for which NIMS has standards and credentials. If we get interest from our community to register IRAPs in those areas, we certainly can. And but right now we're focused on these at the top. They're our main programs anyway. If you've worked with NIMS for any length of time, machining obviously is our foundation. Industrial technology maintenance has been around for about 5 years. And then dimensional measurement and Industry 4.0 are both new standards that we've released this year, and the credentials for those will be coming out next year. And then for other industries, if like I mentioned, we're currently looking to add additive to our portfolio. And as we add other industries, they'll be added to our IRAP offerings as well. So we can go on to the next slide. So this is all just kind of introductory material. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about what's required of an IRAP, like what makes something an IRAP. So DOL has identified, they call them 5 hallmarks. NIMS has kind of broken them down into program components, and then from that, we've further broken it down into the actual training plan and the legal requirements of an IRAP. So I don't have slides for each of these. I'm just going to talk through them at a high level. I do also want to emphasize that part of NIMS program is we didn't just create a standard for an industry recognized apprenticeship. We created a whole suite of tools and templates and all based on our standards and credentialing framework, but that can be applied to multiple industries. So even though we work within the industries for which we certify, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to use our credentials. If you're using another program or another credential, you could still register your apprenticeship with NIMS. And I'll explain that as we go. But so let's start with just the training plan. We have an apprenticeship agreement. That's just a very simple document that identifies what the program is, what the apprentice is committing to, if there's a time component to it, what wages they will make. If you've worked in a registered program, it's very similar. It's just an agreement telling both parties, both the apprentice and the organization, the sponsor or employer, who's committing to what and for how long. And then for NIMS, it tells us the same thing as the overseeing body. It tells us that, it shows us that everybody is in agreement that this is what the apprentice is committing to do and to learn and when and how long. And this is the training that the employer is willing to provide over this time period. NIMS does have a template for that. So if you use our template, obviously you can create your own if you choose to, but if you use our template, there's no real requirement when you're filling out the application. You just check the box saying you're using our apprenticeship agreement template. Then the paid work component, obviously that's kind of the linchpin of any apprenticeship program is you're paid for going through the program, for receiving the training and for doing the work. So that one difference, however, in this from a registered program is that there's not necessarily a required wage progression. It depends on the length of the apprenticeship. So, obviously if you're having an apprenticeship program that may only take someone 10 months, there may not be a wage progression of any significance in that. So all you have to do in this program is identify what wages they're going to make. They obviously have to meet federal, state, and local laws for your area. So whatever your minimum wage laws are, that you have to pay the apprentice at least that. But NIMS doesn't dictate beyond that. You meet your federal, state, and local requirements, and the apprentice has to be informed of what they're going to make. If there is any kind of progression, if they get, paid extra for credentials that they earn or for certain times, or if the apprenticeship is going to be longer. For more involved programs, obviously, that you may need a wage progression. If it's going to take someone 2 or 3 years to get through, they're probably going to expect some kind of pay increase during that time. So we would just work with your team to help identify what the best solution is, both for you and the apprentices. Third component, OJT and work experience. Again, very common. This is the hands-on portion of the IRAP. And I think it's pretty straightforward. You do have to have an OJT plan. You have to submit that as part of your application. The application itself is only about 4 pages long, and then you do have to submit some supporting documents. So obviously OJT is probably the biggest documentation piece that an IRAP applicant needs to supply. Most of the rest of these are going to be templates or referencing other documents, but the OJT plan is probably the most significant piece that you have to develop. And again, we have not necessarily templates because it would be different for each organization, but we have some best practices and some guidelines that we can provide to programs to help them understand how to do that if that's a question. And for related instruction, again, the purpose of related instruction is to give the apprentices the theory and any other kind of knowledge and skills training that they can outside of the OJT experience. The main requirement here that IRAPs must demonstrate is that the related instruction is truly related to both JT hands-on experience that they're getting and the credentials that they will be seeking. So that's the main thing. We have a list of pre-approved programs, training programs. I know we have a lot of educators on this call. So if many of you probably already qualify, if you're using NIMS credentials and have aligned your training to our credentials, then you would be on that pre-approved list. So all of our accredited programs are on the list. We also work with some third-party organizations who have aligned their training to our program. They are on the list. So those are mostly online providers, but they also have some hands-on. So those would be organizations like Tooling U, SME, Festo Didactic, Cengage, who publishes the precision machining textbook. Goodhart Wilcox also has a textbook for our industrial maintenance program. Amatrol has aligned their curriculum. So those are all on the pre-approved list. So if you're selecting those, you don't have to provide any additional documentation in your application. You just tell us which ones you're using. If you're using outside curriculum that's not on the list, there is slightly more paperwork you have to provide, because you have to show us, what the learning objectives are, that they do in fact crosswalk to the OJT and credentials, et cetera. But it's still a relatively easy process to fill out. Then on to credentials. Credentials is kind of twofold in an IRAP. So DOL does require that they include an industry recognized credential. So again, we have a list of pre-approved credentials that we will use. Obviously our own are included on that list, but we also will recognize other credentials by other national credentialing bodies that are relevant to whatever apprenticeship program you might be trying to have recognized. So that could include things like AWS for welding, or it could include like OEM certificates. So I know, for example, Haas Automation has a certificate for using their controllers for CNC operators. So things like that would be also on this kind of pre-approved list. And again, just because it's not on the list doesn't mean you can't use it. You just have to submit additional information to us so we can validate that it is a true industry recognized credential and not, just a certificate of completion or something. That is one thing that's not allowed, is certificates of attendance or completion or things like that. It has to be an actual certificate or certification. The second type of credential in an IRAP is the IRAP credential itself. So NIMS will issue to completers of IRAPs, the apprentices, similar to, if in a registered program you get your journeyman card. In an IRAP you get your IRAP certification. So it'll be issued by NIMS as an official SRE of the U.S. government, and it will be an official credential that apprentice can then use to take elsewhere. And then the final component of the training plan is mentorship. So that was also a big component for DOL, having mentors available to the apprentices to help them throughout the way. We have simplified this as much as we can as well. We have a kind of a basic mentorship plan, like a template that companies can use if they don't have their own, and some sort of best practices models that we can include. So of all of the training plan components, like I said, the main thing that a company would have to provide, or a sponsor would have to provide any significant documentation on, is the OJT and work experience piece of it, the hands-on. What is the training plan? What are they going to be doing? And we can, like I said, we have templates for that, and not really templates, but more best practices for that, that we can provide. But that's the main component that's unique to each employer. And then the rest, most of it is just using existing tools and materials that are out there, and just telling us how you plan to piece those together. Our approach to apprenticeship, like I mentioned in the beginning, is about quality. We want to make sure that the training actually meets the employer's needs, and we define that by the end performance of, what do you need someone to be able to do, and then build your program around that. And then if you do that, if you start with the end in mind, all of these other pieces will kind of fall into place, and where we can help you with sort of a I don't want to say canned model, but a kind of a NIMS model, NIMS approach to apprenticeship. We kind of have that, so you can just kind of plug and play your pieces into it. The last bit of this is the legal bit. Essentially, we as the SRE are responsible for making sure that any IRAPs we recognize meet the federal, state, and local laws of their area for safety, equal opportunity, equal employment opportunity, diversity, and harassment. So it's just making sure that you have the policies in place, and that you don't have 100 OSHA filings against you or something like that. So we have a very simple template that companies can fill out. It's one page. We don't have to necessarily line of your EEOC policy. We just need to know that you have one and that it's in compliance with your with the laws in your area, in your jurisdiction. So we aren't attorneys. We're not going to tell you what you have to do. We're just making sure that you are aware of it and have policies in place, if that makes sense. So those are kind of the required components of an IRAP. Again, our application is about 4 pages long. We're in the process of moving it online, so hopefully that'll make it more user-friendly. But right now it's about 4 pages, a PDF form that you fill out, and then there's some required supplemental documentation. But my expectation for an application package is, if you already have a training program in place and you're just trying to register it, you may have to add in a couple of components that you didn't have in order for it to meet all the required components. But I don't think it would take the average company a significant amount of time to complete the application to register their program with NIMS. We can go on to the next slide. So reporting, this is the other kind of, I guess, big component of IRAPs. Is IRAPs have to report certain information to NIMS, and then NIMS has to report certain information to DOL. So depending on the size of the program and the length of the program will depend on how often an IRAP would have to report to NIMS. And again, we have a very simple cloud-based spreadsheet that you can just pop this information in. It's not a ton of information. You can see here, it's basically just information about the apprentices, how many you have in these different categories: new, active, completers. For the completers, how many of those are still employed, that kind of thing. The time and cost, so any time constraints that you have to the program would be included there. The cost here means any cost to the apprentice. I think most apprenticeship programs, a lot for larger employers, they cover the related instruction, like tuition and things like that for their apprentices. Some make the apprentices pay, but then if they're successful and complete, they get reimbursed. And then some just pay for it completely. So, but the cost aspect here is anything that apprentices are required to pay themselves. And then obviously the wages of the apprentices, and then any credential or education attainment. So industry credentials, if it's a long enough program that they might be able to get an associate's degree, those kinds of things are here. And then that's that piece, that second bullet there under employers and sponsors requirements. That's what we collect that we have to then be able to aggregate and pass on to DOL. The other stuff is really more for NIMS monitoring of the program. So any changes to the program, if you're changing the length of the program or the wages or things like that, that information has to be reported to NIMS. we don't necessarily have to report that to DOL on a regular basis, depending on how significant the change is. I mean, if it's just a slight wage change, that's not significant. If it's just extending the time by a couple of months, that's not that's not anything we would report to DOL. So once we get all of that information, that's what we use to monitor apprenticeship programs, make sure that they're continuing to meet their requirements. There will be at least an annual requirement for reporting. I mean, like the program I mentioned earlier, it was a maximum 1-year program. Some were completing it in 10 months. So obviously, if we were only collecting data once a year, that wouldn't really be very useful data to us to know if the program was being successful. So for a program like that, it would be at least twice a year reporting, possibly quarterly. For a longer program that they're allowing apprentices 2 or 3 years to get through, that might be annual reporting or just biannual reporting, because it's the purpose of the reporting is not to create paperwork or busy work. The purpose of the reporting is to give NIMS the data we need to assure both us and the Department of Labor that we understand how the program is running, that things are happening the way they're supposed to, and that it's maintaining quality. So that's the purpose of reporting. And again, we do have templates for this to try to make it as easy as possible. We have cloud-based solutions, we have offline solutions. So trying to keep it as streamlined and easy as we possibly can. Our intent, again, is to have quality training programs that produce results for employers. And the reporting, the application process, we don't want that to get in the way of us helping employers to enhance their training programs. So our focus is to do as much of that kind of background administrative work for you, and you just have to kind of input the data for us. We can go on to the next slide. Excuse me. So the general process that we have is, I mean, obviously first, anyone who's interested should look at the program requirements. We can make those available to you upon request. If you decide that you are interested and you want to apply, right now you just need to request an application. Once it's online, you'll be able to fill out all of that online to get the process started. You request an application. We will provide you that information, and then you would get together all your required documentation, fill in all the blanks for us, and then sign and submit that application with the application fee, which I will explain in just a minute. Once we have it, we will assign you to one of our account representatives. We'll review your application within 30 days. During that 30 days, we may reach out to you for additional information or clarification. And then we will notify you of approval or denial of the application. Once we've approved them, every month we have to report to DOL any new approved programs that we have. And we will also put your program on our website, just the name of the program. It doesn't have to include contact information or anything like that. And in this whole review process and approving and denying, I do want to stress, I mean, NIMS, I've said this a bunch, you're probably tired of me saying it, but our goal is to help companies enhance their training programs and get results from their training. So our goal in this application process is never to deny an application. It's always to help you get your application approved. So we don't do it as submit your application and then 30 days later you're going to get a yes or no answer from us. We're going to get your application and then work with you during that 30 days to make sure that we have everything we need to be able to approve it. And I mean, obviously there will be times when maybe we just can't get there because an organization either just doesn't want to do certain things that are required of an IRAP, or they don't have the resources or whatever. But where we can, we want to help you get the program approved. That is our point. We want more apprentices. We want more high quality training programs. So don't view this process as a, we're just going to come in with a stamp and put a big red X on your application with no explanation. That's not our intent here. So I think we're getting close to the end. We can go on to the next slide. So the fees. So right now, this is the fee that we have set up. Is there's an application and assessment fee of $2,500. I do want to say that, you know, as I've mentioned several times, the real purpose of this fee is really just to cover our time of reviewing the applications, but also all the tools and templates that we're providing to applicants to streamline the process for you. So it's not really a fee to process your application as much as it is a fee to get access to all of these kind of tools and resources to get your program recognized. And then there is an annual maintenance fee. Again, that's just to recover our time and expense of collecting the data and reporting to DOL. So those are the only two fees right now. We are planning on running several specials to kind of kick off, you know, and launch the program. So stay tuned to that. Check out our website often. Check out, you know, make sure you're signed up for our email notices, because we will be running some kind of sales campaigns on this, because we've registered one program. We have another couple that we are working on right now, but we want to get the program up and running, and we want to register programs. So keep an eye out for that. But these are the general fees, and that I don't anticipate there being, you know, a bunch of other fees for it. This is just what it is, a basic one-time fee, and then an ongoing fee of $500, which for a training program is pretty reasonable, I think. So I think with that, that's sort of the high-level overview. Now I want to take some time. I think we have plenty of time now. We can take some questions.
Yes. Can you hear me okay, Rebecca?
I can hear you, yes.
Great. So we do have some questions. Quite a few of them are the same. So I think I will start and read off some questions that people have posted in the Q&A that, you know, Rebecca will address. But, you know, if you have others, please feel free to keep posting, and we can try and cover as much as we can in the next, 15, 20 minutes. So first one that has come in, Rebecca, that is there's a couple people that have asked that is there any advantage to converting an approved existing apprenticeship program into an IRAP?
We've had that question come from several of our board members and other partners. And I honestly think this is it's kind of a personal decision for the company. So there are things about IRAPs that are more flexible than a registered program. As an SRE, you know, we're representing the Department of Labor, who also represents registered apprenticeships. So I wouldn't say everybody who has a registered apprenticeship program should convert to an IRAP. I don't think that's the answer. But I do think for some companies, if you have a registered program and you're happy with it, keep it. You know, that I think that's fine. But if you see some things in the IRAP program, like the flexibility on time requirements, or the flexibility on wage progression, or certain things like that, if that is appealing to you and you want to pursue it, as a registered program, you would basically already qualify, because you already have all the required components of an apprenticeship. So it would be a very easy process to switch. So that's how I would answer that. Is I don't think it's necessary for everyone, but there could be some programs out there who may see a benefit of some of the differences in the two programs. And it could go the other way too. I mean, if you have if you have an IRAP, and on down the road you say, hey, you know, we think we want to register this for whatever reason, you would essentially already have all the components in place, and it would be relatively easy to switch that over. So that's how I would answer.
Thank you. And to follow, I guess, up on that, another, I guess I would say this is one of the most popular questions that has come in so far, is sort of what is the benefit of formalizing a training program as an IRAP versus just like an in-house, you know, on-the-job training that is already there?
I mean, I think there's several benefits to it. I mean, one, right now there's a lot of funding surrounding this. There's the current DOL scaling apprenticeship grants, which were targeted specifically toward IRAP. They have two more opportunities they put out. One I think is already closed. The other is currently open right now. They're open for both registered and industry recognized apprenticeship programs. But so there is some federal funding tied to using IRAP. I think too, I mean, to be a little self-promotional, if I can, I think working with NIMS to help enhance your training program is as much of a benefit as having the actual piece of paper saying you've been officially recognized. But because I think we have some models and some tools that can really help companies approach training in a way that they may not have thought of in the past. And so I think there's that. And then there's also the value to the apprentice, to the people you're training and hiring. They're getting more out of it than just a typical on-the-job training program. They're getting access to industry credentials, to possible college credit, to an IRAP certification, which we're hoping over time that will come to carry similar or the same weight as a journeyman card. I mean, this is still a legitimate, federally recognized apprenticeship program. So we think that, that there's kind of multiple layers of value there.
Thank you. And can a program that's already a registered apprenticeship also become an IRAP?
Yes, yeah, you could. I'm not sure. I'll be honest, I don't know why you would want to do both, because that's just kind of a lot of double reporting. But as I mentioned before, if you have a registered program, it's basically already going to qualify as an IRAP. There would just be a few little tweaks we would probably make, and a few clarifications. But yeah, you certainly could do that if you wanted to.
Okay. And does the work, the paid work component have to be, is there a minimal hours per week for that component?
No, there's not. That is another benefit of IRAP, is there's a lot more flexibility in terms of how you structure things. So we've had one program that when the apprentices started the program, they were spending virtually all of their time in the classroom, and the paid work component of it was very small, like maybe 20%. And then over the course of the apprenticeship, that changed as they gained more knowledge and skills and more hands-on experience. That became more of a 50-50 split. And then as they moved, by the time they got to the end, it was almost completely reversed. So there does have to be a paid work component from the beginning all the way through the end. But it can be flexible to meet whatever program needs you might have.
And in terms of a lot of questions came in regarding, do academic credentials such as diplomas, degrees, certificates qualify as an industry recognized credential?
If it is an actual credential that is recognized in your area, yes, it could. So certainly a degree would count. It becomes a little more challenging with college issued credentials, because as I mentioned, it can't just be a certificate of completion or a certificate of attendance saying, this person attended this class for 40 hours. That does not count. But if it's an actual certification that denotes skill attainment and is approved by your local industry. So, I mean, most colleges have an advisory council of employers. If it's approved by that, then it would likely count. But that would be an area where you would probably have to submit a little bit more information for us to be able to make that determination. But again, our intent is to be as open and flexible as possible.
Okay. And there's a few people that wanted to know where they can find a list of the industry recognized credentials.
You can find that on our website. Just our list of credentials. I think perhaps one of our staff can paste the link in the chat for you. So that those are the ones that are automatically recognized. Again, we would recognize other industry credentials from, I think I mentioned like AWS or for welding or MSSC, if you're familiar with them, for other manufacturing. We would recognize other entities who are generally recognized as national certification bodies. So in the application, there is a list of examples. And as we register more programs, we will add to that list.
Great, thank you. There are some people that wanted to know, from a college standpoint, does the instructor have to be NIMS certified? And if so, who would pay for that? So that came in a couple times about that specific question.
I mean, NIMS doesn't have a requirement for instructors to be certified currently. I mean, for our accredited programs, if your training program is going to be accredited by NIMS, then yes, you have to have certified instructors. But this is more focused on the employer side of it. So there's no specific requirement that instructors training on the related instruction have to be certified. We would recommend it, but it's not a requirement.
Okay, great. Kind of a two-part question that came in where somebody wanted some clarification. So they say, as I understand in the presentation, NIMS became an SRE for 3 areas. 2 questions regarding becoming an SRE. How many industries can an applicant to become an SRE start with? And what is the process of adding an industry once an entity has become an SRE?
Okay, I can answer the first one easily. So the requirements to be recognized in a certain industry, like for NIMS, we showed you the industries that we are operating in. You have to demonstrate to the Department of Labor that you have the subject matter expertise to be able to adequately review programs that are applying to you for recognition. So you have to have the depth of subject matter expertise. So, for NIMS, we have a lot of areas that we can gain that expertise from. We have our own board, we have our own advisory council, which is at least 51% industry. We have our technical work groups that we worked with on multiple occasions on various credentialing programs. We have our stakeholders, which represent over 6,000 employers. So we have a pretty broad pool to pull from. And so that's how we were able to get several industries under our belt. As far as adding to those industries, the Department of Labor has said that you can. Again, I think you would just have to demonstrate that you have the subject matter expertise in those areas. And I don't, to be honest, I don't know the DOL process for that at this time. I'll find out very soon because we're planning on adding another industry to ours. I mentioned additive manufacturing. So I will find out what that is, but today I don't know it. I'm assuming it would just be providing some documentation to them of our subject matter expertise in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Because that's what we did when we applied, is we had to show that to them. So.
Do employers have to pay for related training? This was also asked several times.
Employers do not have to pay for related training. Again, if they do require apprentices to pay their own tuition or whatever, that does have to be reported to DOL. So, but that is not it's not something that would prevent a program from being recognized if that is part of the requirement. Because I know, as I mentioned, a lot of larger employers can afford to pay for that or set up some sort of reimbursement for successful completers. Smaller employers may not have the budget for that. So it can be passed on to the apprentice, but you have to report that. And it can't be, like punitive or what's the word I'm looking for? Discriminating against, people who may otherwise be able to enter the program, but the cost is prohibitive. So again, that's something we would work with the applicant on at the time of application.
Okay, thank you. A few more questions. If a trade organization becomes a sponsor, would all of the companies under their membership be covered, or would each company need to apply separately?
It depends on the program. So if you have one sponsor and you're registering let's just say a CNC operator program for a group of 5 employers, as long as the OJT and the related instruction are within like 20% of each other for each company, that we would consider that one application. And so there would be one fee. However, if you wanted to register those same 5 employers, but some of them are doing CNC operators, some of them are doing CNC operators and programmers, others are adding in something else, there would be an additional fee for each of those added occupations or job roles, but it wouldn't be it wouldn't be a whole new application, right? Because again, you're registering the program. The program is sort of like the framework, the building, the truss of the building, and how you fill that building in with, furniture and things like that is different. So once you've established the program, that's one application fee. But if you want to add different occupations, there would likely be an additional fee to that. But it would not be, it would be a fraction of the application fee.
Thank you. In terms of pre-apprenticeship programs, that was a good question. So they're looking to develop more pre-apprenticeship programs that align with apprenticeship programs. It'll give, the students an alternative graduation model in the state of Ohio. How can we work together to support pre-apprenticeship? Has there been a discussion related to that in the IRAP, SRE, area?
We haven't really talked about pre-apprenticeship, but it would work very similarly to the way it does with a registered program. I think, again, it might be a little easier and a little more flexible here because the IRAP requirements are more flexible. But yeah, certainly we would be interested in talking to anyone about setting pre-apprenticeship programs up. I mean, just as NIMS did with registered apprenticeship, we have several models that are already approved with with DOL and various state entities. So, over time, as we register more IRAPs, we're hoping to have sort of these pre-approved models that we can put out there. And I think when we're at that place, it'd be very easy to set up pre-apprenticeships that lead toward those and guide toward those. But I think another benefit of IRAPs is because they include this industry recognized credential requirement, it makes it a lot easier for high school programs or community college programs who want to have pre-apprenticeship programs, as long as you're gearing them towards certain industry credentials that are being used in IRAPs, you sort of already are a pre-apprenticeship, even if it's not in a formalized way. So definitely we would be interested in talking about that more. Like I said, our goal is to help not only companies, achieve their training needs at a high level, but also help schools with the pipeline aspect of it and making sure that we have a continuous flow of, these kind of pre-apprentices that are available to enter into these programs.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the first programs that have been approved? What training areas are they in? Machining, ITM, kind of a little bit about sort of what's already happened.
Yeah, so I mean, right now, I think the only approved IRAP in the country is with Raytheon Technologies. It is a machining program, specifically a CNC operator program. We actually started working with them over 2 years ago to develop that program right after. Many of you may know that, Montez King, our executive director, was on the task force for expanding apprenticeship. And right after they released their findings, which essentially introduced this concept of IRAP to the broader community, we started working with Raytheon to develop their program. And we expected, or maybe we didn't expect, but we hoped, that the government would have moved a little faster, but it's the government and it moves at its pace. So we essentially set up their IRAP with them 2 years ago. and they've actually had two cohorts of apprentices go through it, and they're starting their next cohort. They were supposed to start it this year, I believe, but because of COVID, it got pushed to the first quarter of next year. So that's the first program we've recognized. We do have a couple others in the works. I can't say their names because they're not official yet, but they are both there's one in machining and one in industrial maintenance that we are hoping to announce by the end of the year. And then there are others in various stages of interest, but not as far down the pathway.
Okay, thank you. I know there's a couple of questions that were sort of specific to different areas. So if an association several standards like metal stamping, spinning, roll forming, could this be rolled into one program, or does it require separate applications for each area?
That's another one where you could fill out just one application, but there would likely be an additional fee to add in the other occupations. But the program and how it is structured as an IRAP could be one IRAP. And then the different pieces would obviously be the hands-on training, the OJT piece of it, the related instruction, for the knowledge and skills specific to each of those job roles, and then the wages, would likely be different, and even the time component might be different. But you could have one IRAP that had maybe 3 or 4 different job roles. For this job role, the time is you have up to a year. For this job role, you have up to 2 years. For this one, you have up to 18 months. But that could all still be wrapped under one umbrella program.
Okay. Do you know if welding specifically or PMMI mechatronics are on the list?
For welding, I mean, NIMS is not a welding expert. However, if you did have a program that was in one of our related industries and you're using welding as part of it, and you have welding certifications by an organization like AWS or something, that would certainly count. Again, PMMI mechatronics, I mean, we have our own industry or ITM certifications, but we would also recognize others. I would assume PMMI would be on that list of credentials we would recognize.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just 2 more questions unless any others come up, but we're right at that 1 hour mark. So one question that's come up. So if someone is workforce development agency providing monitoring reporting for free, but they wanted to use NIMS as a credentialing body, how would that work if there's already, a workforce development or a WIB or something that's providing sort of that similar service?
Well, it depends. I mean, I'm not exactly sure I fully understand the question, but if you want the program to be an IRAP recognized by NIMS, you would have to apply to NIMS and pay the fee and be recognized. If your program is being recognized by another SRE or something like that, and you want to incorporate NIMS credentials in it, you can certainly do that. And NIMS doesn't, I mean,
yeah, it doesn't sound like it's another SRE, but
be another training.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, it didn't sound like it was another SRE, but perhaps someone acting in that role without the SRE designation.
Yeah, in that case, I would say I would recommend, trying to get that third party entity to explore funding opportunities. And again, they could, if you have several employers who are all interested in recognizing the program and using NIMS to do that, you could pool your funds, and each employer wouldn't have to pay that much. And the Workforce Development Board or the WIB or whoever could be the entity that was the sponsor with NIMS and dealing with NIMS on that. So there would be several ways you could work that out, I think.
Okay, excellent. And then the last question we have here is if you can discuss in some more detail the monitoring process by NIMS of employers, that have IRAP programs. So maybe go over a little bit more of what that process looks like.
Yeah, so when you apply to NIMS to have us recognize your program, we will set up a reporting template for you based on, you know, the criteria in your application. So based on the wages, based on the number of apprentices you expect, the number of job roles or occupations, and all of the components that you report to us that are going to be in your program, you'll have a template to report. Again, it can be, all of our templates right now are in the cloud, but we know some companies, due to privacy, can't operate that way. So you can pull that report offline. And then it's simply just providing us the data on the apprentices, and we monitor that data. So, you know, I mean, if you have a program that's supposed to take a year and it has 3 credentials in it, and you're reporting to us in the 3rd quarter of that program, and not a single apprentice has earned any credentials, that's a red flag to us. And that's something that would, you know, generate an inquiry from our team. But if you're reporting that, you know, some of your apprentices have completed early, everybody's getting there, you know, if the data shows us that the program is running smoothly, we're going to assume the program is running smoothly. And then on an annual basis, we will, you know, when we do sort of our annual follow-up with the organization, there will be a slight questionnaire, like, again, no more than 10 or 12 questions, where you'll have to answer some questions about the program to ensure, you know, give us the confidence that it's still functioning the way that it was when you first applied and we first approved it. But our main mechanism for evaluating the quality of the programs and the employers is the data that we're going to be collecting from you about the apprentices themselves. And then this annual kind of renewal, it's not really a renewal application because it's not nearly that involved, but it's also, the annual review is sort of a time if you need to make any changes to the program, you can do it then as well. So that's kind of how we intend to monitor employers, is through data collection.
Thank you. I think that is, I don't see any other questions that are open.
Okay.
I believe that you have covered all of them.
Okay, well, I hope that this was a useful webinar for people, that it gave you information you were looking for. I see most of you have kind of stuck with us to the end here, so I appreciate that. As the sign says, the recording and the slides will be provided to everybody who registered. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our team. You can get us through our contact page on our website. And with that, I think we will bid this webinar completed.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca, so much.
Yes, thank you, Dina, for facilitating, and thank you, everybody, for attending.